Good evening, everyone. Will I have us turn on, Josh? Sound good? Okay. Good to see y'all out. Hey, it's an honor to be out. Like Josh said, we've been acquainted for several years now, I know, and one of the beautiful things about that we can use social media for good for is making those acquaintances. And so, like I said, we've been in passing, and I think we've overlapped at several congregations before and speaking in other events. So it's so good to finally be here, and I've heard so much good about this congregation and able to follow and kind of keep up with it. So I do appreciate it so much. And what an excellent lesson topic that you have for your summer series on the idea of deeper and really looking at what we can do to further our lives as Christians and what we can do and be stronger. And so here I am talking about deeper commitment to a group of people. It's late. We're in July. Everybody's busy. A lot of places you could be, and you're here. And so we're speaking to the group that is as committed as we can imagine. So I do appreciate you so much for being here. But there's also things that we can do, and we know that we can do, in order to further our Christian lives. We need to be able to be that example to those others that may not be here tonight for one reason or another, or perhaps are missing, or perhaps we need to go after them. And so there's some things that we can do at both angles of that. But what I think this is a perfect topic for is the idea of speaking about commitment and looking at resolutions. Here we are, and I don't know if y'all kind of feel the same way. It's like the first 6 months of the calendar, and all of a sudden we're in July. But I look at that, and you kind of think, here we are in the middle of the year. And my question is, how's your New Year's resolutions going? Do you remember? Did you make any? I hope maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But you think about the idea of resolutions and commitment. We usually talk about these things come first of the year. Everybody's ready. Start of the new year. Let's talk about resolutions. Let's talk about all these things we're going to go in here and do differently. And then we come to about July, and how's it going? Have we been able to follow through on those things? Have we even made any of those commitments? Have we had any of those goals to make? And so it's a good time for us to really reflect as we get into the middle of the year and think about those things we have committed to, maybe at the start of the year, and looking at now what things we can commit to as we look at our life. And so I'd ask you to go ahead and grab your Bible out and be opening up to the book of Psalms. Namely, we're going to be looking at the 101st Psalm. And while you're turning over there, a little bit of background behind this of why exactly we're looking at this tonight. So, of course, we have the majority of the Psalms written by David. And David is authoring this from the perspective of a king at this point. But we know a lot about David. We know that he is a man after God's own heart. We know that he has had a lot of successes in his life up to this point as a king. But we also know that David has his failings. David is not perfect, and we've known that, and we've seen that if you've ever studied his life at all. But whenever you open up to the 101st Psalm, what you will find him writing, and this is a Psalm of David, is he is writing almost a letter to God in a way of looking at commitment. He is talking about what things he's going to be committed to doing and what he's going to do to further his life in service of God. And so it's an excellent opportunity for me and you to look at this and say, here's what David said he is going to do. How well did he do it? And what things is he really focusing on? What things can we really key in on that we can do better, that we can do well? One thing you'll notice in the scripture is that we find a very, very important idea of being goal-oriented. Whenever you read about Paul talking about he is pressing for the prize, he has a goal in mind. He has that finish line in his mind. And we see people all throughout the Bible that have this goal-oriented mind. And so as we read down through this, very simple question for all of us, and that is, what is our goal? Where are we going? Tonight, exactly are we going? And if I don't have a goal in mind, I need to make one. It helps us so much because if we don't think about that, if we don't have a goal in mind, it's kind of like driving without a destination. I mean, we can start off and you can head up northeast, southwest, and if you don't know where you're going, you're going to inevitably end up where you probably didn't mean to go. And so we have to have that goal in mind. And so that's what Psalm 101 is all about, is having that goal in mind, having the idea of commitment, and what things specifically do we need to have in our lives in order to commit to. And so as we're reading down through this, Psalm 101, we're just going to break it down in these verses because David, it's almost like a bullet list. It's almost like bullet points. You go down through it, and he's writing about all of these things that he's going to be committed to doing. And so let's just go ahead down there and look at verse number 1 as we consider what we need to be committed to do. Verse 1 of Psalm 101, David writes, I will sing of mercy and judgment. Unto thee, O Lord, will I sing. Interesting that David points out, the very first thing he says he's going to do, he says, I will sing of mercy, I will sing of judgment. Now, if you stop, and that's one of those verses that we might read through, and we might not think too much about it, but really think about that. The first thing David says he's going to do is kind of a declaration. He is going to sing of God, and look exactly what he is singing about of mercy and judgment. You stop for a second and you think about those things that he is praising God for. He is speaking about mercy and judgment, and he is going to praise God. And so he is looking at God, and he is able to enjoy all of these things in his life, these blessings in his life, and the hope of what's coming after. Why? Well, two of those main reasons is because of God's mercy and his judgment. Both those things going hand in hand. But you look at exactly what he is doing, and you think, well, that may not be a commitment that we might directly make, but look at it from a different angle. He says, I am singing. Why? Because I'm singing of mercy. I'm singing of judgment. Does David look down at this? Does he say that I will sing to God because I have to? No, he is looking forward. It's something that he finds pleasure in doing. It's an action he wants to do. You and I look at this, and we look at verse number 1, and we think about this. That knowledge is the motivation of all of our actions. Why exactly are we doing the things we are doing? Because I can sing because I'm forced to, or I can sing because I love the mercy, I love the judgment of God. Motivation is everything. You know, we can show up, and we know that. We can show up to worship, and we can go through the motions. We can listen to the preacher. We can sing. We can listen to the prayer. Take part of that. Am I doing those things because I feel like I have to, because I'm forced to, or am I doing those things because I love God and because I love his mercy and I love his judgment? And so it's this idea of he doesn't turn the love of God, he doesn't turn his obedience to God into just this idea where he has to do it. And he feels like he doesn't have any other choice. No, he does it because he wants to. And I appreciate y'all being here tonight. You're here because you made the decision to be here tonight. That's the only reason you're here. You made the decision to be here tonight. A lot of people made the decision to not be here tonight. And so as we look at the purpose in our life, now I say that and take into consideration, not talking about those people who are unable to be here. Don't misunderstand me. But we have so much going on in our lives, it's very easy to lose focus of why we're doing what we're doing. We're so busy, and y'all know that. I mean, we're as busy as ever, it seems like. But I have to have that motivation in my mind. And so it's more than just singing about mercy and judgment. It's the idea of the act. And I'll tell you this, it's very simple. And it's as simple as, so I've been married now, we're coming up this month, 8 years. And I found out in those 8 years of marriage that there's a difference between my wife forcing me to buy her flowers and me bringing her flowers because I love her. You think, you stop, well, she gets flowers either way, right? Wrong, right? No, not in marriage. That's not the case. Those one flowers, they're not the real thing, even though they may be beautiful. The motivation's everything behind it. Whenever we think about our worship and our servitude to God, motivation is everything behind it. I'm doing it because I want to, because I have a desire to. And that's what David's saying here. He is doing this because of the desire, this desire that he has to worship God. And so we start and we look at this commitment being made. I'm committed to wanting to do these things. Now go down to verse number 2 with me. Because as you go into verse number 2, and we're going to look at the first part of verse number 2, he then says, I will behave myself wisely in a perfect way. Now, stop there for just a second. As you read the first half of verse number 2, think about the second thing he says. So he's going to serve God, he's going to sing to God, sing of God's love, and sing of his mercy and judgment. But now he says that he is going to walk in a perfect way. He's going to pay attention. He's going to behave himself wisely, is what he says. And what that means is he's saying, I'm going to pay attention to where I am going. I'm going to pay attention to where my feet are taking me. His son, Solomon, is later going to write in Proverbs. If you go to chapter 4 and verse number 26, and keep your Bibles marked there at Psalm 101, but if you go to Proverbs 4 and verse number 26, Solomon will write, ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. And so Solomon's saying, think before you walk. Think about where you are going. And this is that idea of being goal-oriented. There we go. And so the idea of being goal-oriented is I'm paying attention to where my feet are taking me. That's what Solomon says. Think about it before you do it. What do you always tell the kids? Think about it before you do it. Think before you act. Think before you speak. That's an important one, isn't it? But think about those things. Why are we going the direction we're going? Why am I with the people I'm with? Now, if you're in Proverbs, go to the next chapter. Go to chapter 5. Because Solomon, he says here, this is the path. Be very careful of where you're going. Look at chapter 5, verses 5 and 6. Because now he'll say this, and he's talking about the forbidden woman in this text. He says, her feet go down to death. Her steps take hold on hell. lest thou shouldest ponder the path of life. Her ways are movable, that thou canst not know them. Now, if you stop at the end of verse number 6, notice how careful we need to be in considering the road we're going down. So he's describing here the forbidden woman. Where is she going? And she's very clearly going down. He says there in verse number 5, her feet are going down to death. She is walking the path of destruction. How do we walk that path? What are we talking about here? It's all about the choices we make. It's all about the decisions we make and those commitments that we make. And so you're reading this. Does she think about going down to death, as it says there? Well, does she think about it, or does she know and maybe she doesn't do anything? Or perhaps she's just wondering how difficult it is to go through life without any goal, without any purpose. We all probably know people like that in our life. And if we find ourselves in that, look to the Word for what we need to be doing. And this is what we're talking about tonight in Psalm 101, is finding that purpose and being driven for that purpose. But we have to pay attention to where we're going. We have to have that goal and know we're going the right way. Whenever Jesus says in Matthew 7, 13 and 14, he's saying the same thing here that David is writing about. Matthew 7, 13 and 14, of course, says, enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. Is the right path necessarily the obvious path? No, it's not, is it? Whenever he talks about, remember that word straight there, he's not talking about straight as an arrow. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about straight as in the river straits. It's a difficult road. It's a harder road to go down. It's not the easiest path. You're going to have to do some work to probably get down this path or to get up it. I always heard it said, it's kind of like you picture we have a lot of them here, but goat trails. Some of our county roads are, what I'm talking about there. It's a difficult road to travel. It's not the interstate. And so it's not necessarily the obvious path, but we need to think about where we're going to avoid going down that road of destruction. And so David says there, what is he going to do? Behave himself in a perfect way. He's going to pay attention to where he's going. Now read the second half of verse number 2. The second half of verse number 2 says, oh, when wilt thou come unto me? I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. Now, that's a very interesting one, isn't it? Because if you go and you continue the same line of reasoning that he just said, he said he is going to walk, and we might say he's going to walk with integrity, but where's he going to do it at? In his own house. Why do you think he points out, why do you think he specifically says, and we might say, well, of course we need to walk that way all the time, but why do you think he singles out there in verse number 2, he's going to do it in his own house? Well, really, that's where integrity is shown, isn't it? Who are we when nobody else sees? Who am I in my home? Who am I behind closed doors to my wife and to my family? Who am I whenever nobody else sees this? And so whenever you think about this integrity of the heart, it's all in how we treat people in our home, what we do in our home. It's one thing to try to fool everybody as we go out in the world and put on the show that we're living righteously. But where we are truly seen is when nobody is watching. Who are we then? And so asking ourselves these questions, and this is not for obviously anybody in particular, it's for all of us, and asking ourselves that question, who am I when nobody else is looking? Am I the same person I am tonight as I will be whenever I get home and nobody else sees me? Or am I a different person entirely? Would I be recognized if the actions that I choose to do at home were seen in the public eye, or would it be two different people? And so I do think it's very interesting there in verse number 2 that he makes this point. Now, I've heard it said that the idea of the family relationship, the family relationship and the home structure, I've heard it said before, and I think it's a very correct analogy, the home is the proving ground of Christianity. And it really is. It really is. Who we are at home, what we do with our children, with our spouse, perhaps with our parents, whoever it might be, that's the proving ground. Who am I really? Well, I'm that person at home. That's who we really are. So, who am I at home? Whenever you're reading in Ephesians 5 and 6, as Paul is going through these chapters and he is relating the family structure and the family relationship and talking about spouses, he's talking about children, he's talking about all these different things, and he's talking about this as a comparison to the church. Whenever he's talking about this in these relationships, that home is the proving ground of Christianity. It's not this shield where we can go and in here I can ignore all of God's commands. No, in the home is where commitment is shown. And the home is where I truly see who exactly am I. Now let's go down to verse number 3. He keeps going there, and I think this ties in to what we just read. But he says, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. Now, reason with me in this. This is a commitment to redeem the time the right way. I find it so very interesting in verse number 3 how profound what he says is now compared to what he's talking about then. You think about what wicked things could David as a man before the generation you and I are in and all these years past, what wicked things could he truly set before his eyes? What wicked things can we put before our eyes today immediately? We have access to everything, and we just do. And that is down the road of the most wicked things imaginable. It's also down the road of where good can come out of it if we're careful. But he says there, and he makes this very poignant statement he's going to keep worthless things out of his life. He's going to keep worthless things out of it. And you think about how little time we have in perspective. How much time do we waste maybe with things that are worthless? And I think as you read down through there in verse number 3, this idea of the wicked things, you see those wicked things, and not only are they sinful in and of themselves, but what about those things that cause us to probably detract our focus away from God, that we just stay busy and it pulls our focus away? You know, when we think about the idea of commitment, it's something that we do thoroughly. It's something that we do all the time. And if I'm redeeming my time and I'm looking at wicked things and I'm partaking in these things that are pulling my focus away from God and where it should be, I'm wasting that valuable time that we have here. And we did a study, and it was a scary one, but I had, and this was several years ago now, I was teaching the teen class at Curry Street, and at the time, we had a very large teen class. We had kind of combined it for a special summer series we were doing. So we had young adults all through teens. And one of the tests we did is if you go on your phone, you're able to see your screen time. The saddest part was this was during school time whenever we checked it. You know the average time that they spent on their cell phones? I mean, if you had to come up with one, and like I said, this is during school time, the average amount of time was 11 to 12 hours a day that the screen was on. And you're thinking, I'm like, guys, okay, you're at school 8 hours of the day, and so, you know, maybe discount some of that. And some of them said, well, they're looking up things. Okay, maybe. Throw 4 hours out of the way. And we're still maybe 7, 8 hours. And maybe that is not devices. Maybe it's TV. Maybe it's all of these things that we use to distract us. And those things in and of themselves can be used for good, can't they? They can be, absolutely. And they should be. But we can let ourselves become so distracted by those things that we lose all of that time and we don't even know it. And so David, isn't it amazing? Here we are, how many years removed, how many generations, thousands of years removed from his words, and perhaps just as poignant today, maybe more poignant today. And I think the other thing too, the second thing he says there in verse number 3, he says, I hate the work of them that turn aside. What is he talking about there? I hate the work of them that turn aside. He says, I'm not going to get entangled with the evil of the world. Those people that are going to pull my focus away from God. And whenever you think about who those people might be, you know, our minds may drift. We may think of those wicked people, and that can certainly pull us away. But we also have to be very careful that it's not family, friends, coworkers, whoever it might be, who pull us away, who pull our focus away from what is truly important. You are going to be tempted, and this is the definition of, we might say, preaching to the choir, preaching to those that know, but you're going to be tempted to turn away from God, aren't you? If you had one thing to tell the generation coming up, and one piece of advice to warn them about, probably the first thing we would tell them is warn them about all of the ways in which they will be tempted. All the ways that you've went through, that you were tempted, the people in your life that may have tried to pull you away, that may have succeeded at one time or another. But if we lose that focus, boy, how easy it is to lose that time and be lost for good. And so David says, and he makes that statement there in verse number 3, says, it will not cleave to me. He says, I will not let worthless things occupy my life. Can we say the same about our own commitment? So this leads to our next one there. And you'll notice that this is a progression. All of these things, I think, really do tie into each other. But go on there to verse number 4. Verse number 4, he says, a froward heart shall depart from me. I will not know a wicked person. So you stop in verse number 4 and you think about verse 3. So verse 3 is talking about wicked things. He's talking about those things that will pull him away. Now he's talking about the wicked person. And so whenever he says that in verse number 4, I will not know a wicked person. Boy, isn't that interesting? Do we keep ourselves away from those influences that bring us down? What do we do when we're in the midst of them? You know, one thing that has to be noted, we have to say it, is that you and I are not called to be hermits. We're not called to be people who go and hide from the world. But whenever we're in the world and whenever we're around sin, and we're around perhaps the wicked person, what do we do? Do we invite them into our lives to influence us? Because we're going to be around people who are not Christians. We're going to be around people who perhaps say that they hate God, that don't want to be a part of anything that God has to do. So what will I do with those people? And David says in verse number 4, he says, I won't know them. And whenever you think about that, he's putting himself in a situation where he says, I'm not going to be enticed. I'm not going to be tempted by those things that they are doing. You know, if sin wasn't a tempting thing, if it had no appeal, nobody would do it. But it does. It has an appeal, doesn't it? That's why so many in the world are taken by it. And so he says there in verse number 4, I'm not going to let that in. I'm not going to be around those influences. I'm going to stay away from it from the best I can. But also, how do we do that in the world in which we live in? Do people know that we are Christians? Do they know what we stand for whenever those things come up? You ever met a person and perhaps at a gospel meeting, a singer or something like that, or perhaps you're visiting, and you're surprised to see that that person is a Christian? Calls himself one. What can be said of us? Do I have that commitment through my life even when I'm surrounded by those influences? I've got to keep that. And this is where we talk about at the very beginning, that goal. What is my goal? If it is to serve God, I'm going to be careful about what I do in the world. Now go to verse number 5. He says in verse 5, whoso privily slandereth his neighbor, him will I cut off. Him that hath an high look and a proud heart will not I suffer. So this going probably hand in hand back in verse number 4, isn't it? Because you're talking about the wicked person. Now he kind of expounds on that, but we can say a lot about these other things. He says, I'm not going to participate in those people who are slanderers, who are gossipers, and those people who are proud. And he says, I'm going to stay away from those people. In staying away from those people, that also means we are not those people. Now, so often we look at this and we might be checking off the boxes, okay, all of these things, but really look at ourselves. Yes, we might come across those wicked people. We may come across those who are slanderers and those who are proud. We also have to make sure, though, that we are not those people, right? And so whenever he talks about those that are slanderers and he says, I'm going to cut them off, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. Whenever you think about gossiping and slander, there's an appeal to it. We like gossiping. We like the idea of it. I mean, if we didn't, it wouldn't be a thing. Whenever Jesus says in Matthew 12 and verse number 34, he says, O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And so he says there, the language reveals what type of heart we have. And if we have slander and gossip and pride coming out of our mouths, what does that say about my heart? Where's my heart at? Well, obviously, it's not where it needs to be. I will not participate when that happens. I will not be the person who speaks evil of those and who feeds into gossip. One of my favorite illustrations of this, and I've used it for years now, is whenever I was preaching at the Viola congregation, I had a sermon, and I made a very bold statement. I said the exact opposite thing of what I meant to say. That's never happened, right? We know, yeah, it never happens. The exact opposite thing, and it wasn't right. Well, the funniest thing happened. I had two people who brought it to me. One of the people was like a pinball machine that hit everybody else in there before they got back to me. The other one came to me first. Whenever I see a person and they're not in a situation or a life that they should be, what do I do? Do I go behind their back? Do I start talking? I saw him here or her there, whatever it might be, or do I go to them? Do I go to them and make that situation right? It's so easy, and we think maybe we're doing them a favor by not going to them. We're not. If we care about their soul, we'll go to them. And so he says, I'm going to stay away from those people. I'm going to stay away about it. There's nothing about servanthood. There's nothing about discipleship that is about slandering and being proud. those things are the opposite of what we are called to be in Christ. And so really, what should it all be about? It's not about me. It's all about God. It's all about Jesus and his sacrifice for us. Is that exemplified in my life? Go to verse number 6 with me. He keeps reading. He says, "Mine eyes shall be upon the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He that walketh in a perfect way, he shall serve me." So now we go into the things that he says avoid. Don't do these things. And we've had the list there. But now he says, where should we be spending time? Who should we be around? What people should I be around in my life? How much time do I spend with those who are faithful? And he says, rather than spending our time with those who are trying, even if they are inadvertently trying, but if they, because of their lives, are pulling us away from God, instead of spending my time doing that, instead of spending my life doing that, how much time do I spend with those who are faithful? Do I make that effort to spend with them? And hopefully we do. Hopefully we know about each other's lives. We know the things that are going on, whether they're encouraging, whether they're bad. Are we weeping with our brethren as they weep? Are we laughing whenever it's time to rejoice, as Paul says in Romans? Do we have this attitude? I'm going to spend my life with those who are faithful, with those that I can help build up. And so he says in verse number 6, I'm going to think well of them. I'm going to watch their ways. I'm going to spend time with them. And then finally, he says in verses 7 through 8 as he finishes, he says this, "He that worketh deceit shall not dwell within mine house. He that telleth lies shall not tarry in my sight. I will early destroy all the wicked of the land, that I may cut off all wicked doers from the city of God." Finally, what does he say at the end? He says, he will have nothing to do with evil. When we go back up, and whenever we consider what he says about the importance of who we are in the home, is it also equally as important as who we are letting in our homes? And maybe not necessarily people, but what about those influences that come into our life? And he says there, no one who practices deceit, read that in verse 7, no one who practices deceit is going to be in my house. Whenever you think about the home and what the home is, as we call it the proving ground of Christianity, who we really are is seen in the home. Our integrity is seen in the home. And whenever he says this, you remember what Joshua said. He said, what did he say about he and his house, right? His home, that was a sacred place that they would serve God. It didn't matter what anybody else did. They were going to serve God. And he says, in order for us to do that, David says in verse number 8, or verse number 7, we're not letting those influences come in that's going to detract from that. We're careful about who we are letting in, who we are letting influence us. And I've heard it said before, and I think there's probably a lot of truth to it, that you and I are the summation of the closest people we have in our lives. Who are we surrounded by? Because you are going to be like them. Whether you like it or not, we're going to be more like those people we spend time with. And so am I spending time, as David says, and he points out there in verse number 7, am I spending time with those who may be deceitful? Am I spending time with those who are wicked? No, we're not going to have that sinful behavior in our homes, are we? We're not going to bring it in. We're not going to invite it in. And so if we are so cautious about who we are at home, that also means I'm cautious about who I'm letting in. Is he saying they're not to be hospitable? Not at all. But what he is saying is be very careful about who you let influence your life and your family's life. How can light spend time with those who have no interest in the light and only want to live in darkness? How can they do that? So he says we will surround ourselves. He says he's going to cut them all off in verse 8. He's going to cut them all off. And he says we're going to surround ourselves with those who help our faith and not those who undermine it. Who do I have in my life? Now, don't say, well, Hank the preacher said go home and I'm cutting off relationships. It's not what this is about. But it is about those who we let into our lives that influence us. And whether we like it or not, they will rub off on us. And so we have to be very careful that we are the light of the world and that we're not stuck somewhere in between. Are our homes a beacon of light? Am I committed enough to put these things into practice? And as you read Psalm 101, David, and I think it's probably very clearly seen that he's writing this, and I say that because of the power that he's talking about that he has in verse number 8 to maybe enact these things. And throughout the chapter, I think he makes that point. So he's probably writing this from a perspective of a king, as he is the king probably at this point. Did David keep all of these commitments before God? No, he didn't, did he? Do you think you and I will keep all of these commitments before God without ever failing? Probably not. The most beautiful part about Psalm 101 is I think in a way it is a lesson for you and I today, but it is also the picture of the perfect one to come. Because you and I today, we may fall prey like David did, and he absolutely did, falling short. But the reason we have the ability to have this hope, and to have the hope that David is talking about here of looking after, of the light that we are trying to go, this goal that we're trying to go after, is because of our Savior. And because he is the one that really is the fulfillment of Psalm 101. He is the one who's able to do this and not fall short. Does that mean I look at this and I say, well, if David wasn't able to do it, and David is this man after God's own heart, he has all these accolades and all these great things he did, and he did, then I'm not even going to try. No, this is not a reason for us to say I'm not going to be committed. No, it's a reason for us to say that I am going to be committed. Why? Because Jesus is the fulfillment of this psalm. And he is the fulfillment of why you and I can have that hope and why we have that drive and that purpose to be more, to have that deeper commitment in our life. That's seen at home. That's seen when we're out in public. That is seen by God through everything that we do. I'll ask you to turn one final place and then we'll end. Go to Isaiah chapter 11 in verses 1 through 5. Isaiah chapter 11 verses 1 through 5. And as you turn over there, remember the life that Jesus lived. The example that he set for you and me. Here he lived a life of integrity. Did he pay close attention to where his feet were? You better believe it. He paid attention to the choices he made, where he's going. Do you think Jesus wasted his time on worthless things? I don't think so. I know he didn't. He didn't waste his time on that. Did he cut off those wicked things in his life? He did. Now, does that mean that he did not spend time with sinners? No, he certainly did. But he did not spend that time in order to become more wicked or to be pulled away. He did it so they might have the hope of the everlasting place that they could be with God and him in heaven. And so as we look at Jesus, look at Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 through 5, and here's the hope you and I find. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. And shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. Jesus is able to come in, fulfill all of these things, and because of that perfect sacrifice, give you and I the hope of that eternal home in heaven with him and God. That's why we have that hope. So I ask you one very simple and one final question tonight as we go through the idea of deeper commitment. What one of these things can I be working on in my life that I think I can do better on? We look at the list and we might say, and give yourself some credit. You're here tonight, and we do appreciate that. That's so encouraging to us to see that. But look at this and think, what can I do more? What can I be more committed about? And as we make these resolutions, let's make one of the 1st of July to have this deeper commitment toward God, to have this deeper commitment as David is bringing for us, to be able to love God, not because I have to, because I want to, because of his mercy, because of his judgment. To behave myself in a way that I ponder where I'm going, that I make sure in verse number 2 that I'm walking in a way that has purpose. And as he says in verse number 3, I'm going to get rid of those things, those evil things out of my mind. In verse number 4, he says that also means those wicked people. I'm going to get rid of them, including those slanderers and proud in verse number 5. I'm going to spend time with the followers of God in verse 6. In verse 7 and 8, I'm going to despise evil. I'm going to keep those things out of sight, away from the home. Tonight, what can we do to have that deeper commitment? Here is outlined for us in Psalm 101. I challenge all of us to look at these things and say, how can I improve? What more can I be committed about? One thing that we can all do is certainly pray and be the example to our other perhaps fallen brothers and sisters who have fallen away. I think if there's one thing all of us probably have in our life is somebody who is that. And maybe in our families who has fallen away, or perhaps they're not a Christian. Whenever you think about deeper commitment, all of this, the only way any of this matters, what we talked about tonight, is if first we are obedient and we have obeyed what God says to do in His plan of salvation. That's the only way we can be deeper in our commitment toward God. And so if we've not started off that journey, the question for you and me is, why not tonight? We've got time to redeem, to do the right thing. Let's not waste it away doing those things that are unwholesome, those things that will detract our faith, those things that will detract our purpose in life. But if you're a person who's not yet a Christian, the question is, why not tonight? Why delay any longer? This is the only road, and it's not going to be the easiest road, but it's the only road that ends with an eternal home in heaven with God. And let's all find that road, encourage one another together, encourage those who are fallen away, perhaps those who are not Christians. Here tonight, if you're one who's never obeyed the gospel of Christ, or if you're a Christian, you've fallen away, you've fallen short, or maybe you're just somebody that needs encouragement, you need the prayers of the church. That's what we're here to help for. So tonight, if we can help you in any way at all, please come forward as together we stand and sing this song of encouragement.
Oh, do not let the word